Introduction to the Alchemy of Happiness by Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali and produced by Joyful Muslims. O believer, know that man was not created in jest, nor was his creation random. He was marvelously crafted for a great purpose. Though he is not eternal, man will live forever. His body may be earthly and humble, but his spirit is lofty and divine. When he purges his soul of carnal desires through the crucible of abstinence, he attains the highest state. No longer enslaved to lust and anger, he becomes endowed with angelic qualities. In this elevated state, he finds his heaven in contemplating eternal beauty, rather than seeking worldly pleasures. When a person cleanses themselves from worldly desires through discipline and self-control, they rise to their highest potential. No longer controlled by lust or anger, they develop angelic qualities. In this state, they find joy not in physical pleasures, but in reflecting on eternal beauty. This process of spiritual transformation is similar to the rare and mysterious alchemy that turns base metals into gold. It is not easy to find or practice. It's for this reason that the author has written this book, titled The Alchemy of Happiness. The wisdom of God that makes this transformation possible is stored in the hearts of prophets. Anyone who searches for it elsewhere will be left disappointed and without hope on the day of judgment, when God will say, "We have removed the veil from your eyes, and today your sight is clear." God has sent 124,000 prophets to teach humanity how to purify their hearts of base qualities through abstinence and self-discipline. This spiritual transformation can be summarized as turning away from worldly attachments and turning toward God. It includes 4 key areas. 1. Knowledge of self. 2. Knowledge of God. 3. Knowledge of this world as it truly is. 4. Knowledge of the next world as it truly is. We will now explain these 4 key areas in detail. Chapter 1. Knowledge of Self. Knowledge of self is the key to knowing God. This is based on the saying, "He who knows himself knows God." As the Quran says, "We will show them our signs in the world and in themselves, so that the truth may become clear to them." The closest thing to you is yourself. If you don't understand who you are, how can you understand anything else? If you say, "I know myself," thinking it means knowing your body, your face, limbs, and outward shape, this kind of knowledge won't lead you to knowing God. Even if you know what's going on inside your body, like when you feel hungry and eat, or when you get angry and attack someone, that won't help either. Animals do the same. True self-knowledge means knowing these things. Who are you really? Where did you come from? Where are you going? Why are you here? What is your real happiness and misery? Some of your traits are like animals, some like devils, and some like angels. You need to figure out which are accidental and which are essential to your nature. Only then can you find where your real happiness lies. If you're like an animal, eating, sleeping, and fighting, then that's what you'll focus on. If you're like a devil, always stirring up trouble, being deceitful, or causing harm, then that's where your work will lie. But if you're angelic, you will contemplate God's beauty and work on freeing yourself from animal instincts. You should understand why you have both animal instincts, like lust and anger. Are they meant to control you, or are you meant to control them? If you're on the right path, you'll make lust and anger tools you control, rather than things that control you. The first step to self-knowledge is recognizing that you have both an outward form, which is your body, and an inward entity, called your heart or soul. The heart, in this sense, isn't the physical organ, but the essence of who you are. It uses your body's faculties as its tools and instruments. It doesn't belong to the physical world, but to the spiritual one. It's like a traveler who visits a foreign land for business, but is destined to return home. Knowing this heart, its true nature and attributes, is the key to knowing God. If you want an idea of the reality of the heart or spirit, try this. Close your eyes and forget everything around you except your own individuality. This will give you a glimpse of the spirit's unending nature. The deeper essence of the spirit is beyond our full understanding. As the Quran states, they will ask you about the spirit. Say, the spirit is from the command of my Lord. We know this much. It is an indivisible essence, belonging to the world of decrees. And though created, it was not from everlasting. You don't need a full philosophical explanation of the spirit to walk the path of religion. In fact, this deeper understanding comes as a result of self-discipline and perseverance. The Quran says, "Those who strive in our way, verily, we will guide them to the right paths." Think of the body as a kingdom, the soul as its king, and the senses and faculties as the army. Reason is the prime minister, passion the tax collector, and anger the police officer. Passion is always prone to plundering, and anger tends toward harshness. Both passion and anger must be kept in check by the king, your soul, but not killed or expelled, as they serve a purpose. If passion and anger take over, the soul is ruined, as if an angel was handed over to a dog, or a believer to an unbeliever. The goal of moral discipline is to purify the heart of the rust caused by passion and anger, making it reflect the light of God like a clear mirror. But some might ask, if humans are created with both animal and demonic qualities, as well as angelic ones, how do we know the angelic qualities are our true essence, while the others are accidental? The answer is simple. The essence of each creature is found in its highest qualities. A horse and a donkey are both beasts of burden, but the horse's true value lies in its ability to serve in battle. If it loses that, it's reduced to the level of a donkey. Similarly, man's highest faculty is reason, which allows him to contemplate God. If reason dominates, he leaves behind his baser tendencies and becomes capable of joining with angels. But if his lower tendencies prevail, he will continue longing for earthly delights. The rational soul in man is full of marvels, both of knowledge and power. Through it, he masters the arts and sciences, explores the skies, and measures the stars. With reason, he draws fish from the sea, birds from the air, and subdues powerful animals like the elephant and the camel. The five senses are like five doors opening onto the external world, but the heart has a window that opens to the spiritual world. In dreams, when the five senses rest, this window opens, and man receives impressions from the spiritual world, sometimes catching glimpses of the future. The more you purify yourself from fleshly desires and concentrate your mind on God, the more you will be aware of these intuitions. Those who aren't aware of them shouldn't deny their existence. Just as iron, when polished, becomes a mirror, any mind, with proper discipline, can become receptive to divine impressions. The prophet hinted at this truth when he said, "Every child is born predisposed to Islam, but it is his parents who make him a Jew, Christian, or star worshiper." Every human being, deep down, has heard God's question, "Am I not your Lord?" and has answered, "Yes." But some hearts have become so tarnished with rust that they no longer reflect God's light clearly, while the hearts of prophets and saints are highly receptive to divine impressions. The soul not only stands out because of its knowledge, but also its power. Just as angels control the elements, so does the soul rule over the body. Those with special spiritual power can even affect other people's bodies. They can heal the sick, make the healthy ill, or call someone to them from afar. These effects, depending on their nature, are called miracles or sorcery. In short, the knowledge of the soul plays a crucial role in leading to the knowledge of God. If you don't know your own soul, the thing closest to you, how can you claim to know anything else? This is why we must purify and cultivate our souls, allowing them to reflect divine light clearly. In this chapter, we've explored the greatness of the human soul. Ignoring it or allowing its capacities to rust leads to loss in this world and the next. True greatness comes from our ability to progress eternally. Without that, man is weak, fragile, and easily disturbed, much like a beggar who claims he can feed a town but doesn't have enough for a meal himself. Man's real strength lies in rising from the level of animals to that of angels, thanks to the alchemy of happiness. Chapter 2: The Knowledge of God. It is a well-known saying of the prophet that he who knows himself knows God. By reflecting on his own being and attributes, man gains knowledge of God. But not everyone who contemplates themselves finds God. This means there must be a specific way to seek God through self-reflection. There are two ways to attain this knowledge. The first is very deep and not suitable for most people, so we won't discuss it here. The second way is more accessible, and it is as follows. When a person thinks about their existence, they realize there was a time when they didn't exist. The Quran says, "Does it not occur to man that there was a time when he was nothing? You were made from a mere drop of water, without intellect, sight, or hearing." From this, you can understand that you didn't create yourself, nor could you create a single hair. How much more helpless were you when you were just a drop of water? This reflection shows man the power, wisdom, and love of the Creator. Even if all the sages of the world came together and their lives were extended for an indefinite time, they could not improve upon the construction of a single part of the body. Take, for example, the arrangement of teeth for chewing, or the tongue, salivary glands, and throat for swallowing food. No human wisdom could make it better. Similarly, consider the hand with its 5 fingers, each of different lengths and functions. The thumb has 2 joints, while the others have 3. This arrangement allows for grasping, carrying, and striking. Could human wisdom improve on the hand by altering the number or structure of the fingers? No, it's perfect as it is. When a person considers how every need, food, shelter, health, is provided for, they realize that God's mercy is as great as his power and wisdom. As the prophet said, God is more tender to his servants than a mother to her child. From this, we learn about God's existence, power, wisdom, and love. Thus, by knowing ourselves, we find the key to knowing God. Not only do human attributes reflect God's attributes, but even the way the soul exists provides insight into God's nature. Both God and the soul are invisible, indivisible, and beyond space and time. They exist outside the categories of size, shape, or color. Some people find it difficult to understand something that has no physical qualities. But if you think about it, many of our daily experiences, like love, pain, or joy, are not things you can touch or see. These are concepts you understand with your mind, not your senses. Similarly, God and the soul are realities beyond physical attributes. The Quran says, God created man in his own likeness. Just as we learn about God's attributes from our own, We also learn about his governance by observing how we control our own bodies. For example, if you want to write the name God, the thought first forms in your heart. Then, it's sent to your brain, which processes it. From there, the thought travels through nerves, activating your hand to pick up a pen and write the word. In the same way, when God wills something, it first exists in the spiritual realm, then passes through various levels until it becomes a physical reality on earth, like plants, animals, or trees. God has made each of us a king over a small kingdom, our body. Just as God governs the universe from beyond space and time, our soul governs the body from a place beyond physical form. The Quran says, "Man is made in the likeness of God," and this is why each of us can understand God's power, wisdom, and love through the way we govern our own little worlds. There are different levels of understanding when it comes to recognizing God's control. Some people, like a physicist, may think the pen alone writes the letters. Others, like an astronomer, might recognize that the hand moves the pen, but both stop short of understanding that it is the heart, the will, that initiates the whole process. Similarly, some people see only the physical causes of things, while others understand the stars or elements, but few see the ultimate cause: God. These differences in perception explain why people disagree so much. Those who can't see beyond the physical world are like servants mistaking other servants for the king. The laws of the universe must be constant, or there would be no science. But it is a mistake to think that the world runs on its own, without a master. People are like blind men trying to describe an elephant by touching different parts of its body. One touches its leg and says it's like a pillar. Another touches its tusk and says it's a pole. Similarly, the astronomer or physicist confuses the laws they observe with the lawgiver, God. A good example of this confusion can be found in the story of Abraham in the Quran. He looked at the stars, the moon, and the sun, seeking the truth. But when he realized that these were not the creators, he said, "I do not love things that set." Finally, he found his way to God, the one who created everything. The same mistake is made when people explain illness only by its physical causes. A doctor might say someone is depressed because of a chemical imbalance in the brain, or because the weather is too hot and dry. But the truth is, these are only secondary causes. God, in his wisdom, has allowed these conditions to bring that person closer to him. Illness, in a sense, is a cord of love by which God draws his chosen ones closer to himself. The Quran says, "The doctor and the astrologer are right in their knowledge, but they don't see that illness is a way for God to bring his saints closer." Illness, like all other experiences, helps a person know God better. When we say God is great, we're not just saying he is greater than anything else in creation. Creation itself is just a manifestation of God's power, like light coming from the sun. Saying God is great means his greatness is beyond our comprehension, and we can only get a glimpse of it. We can compare this to trying to explain the joy of ruling a kingdom to a child. The child might understand joy in terms of playing with toys, but the joy of ruling is of a much higher order. Similarly, our minds can only grasp a small part of God's greatness. Knowing God is not just a matter of understanding with the mind, it also requires devotion and worship. When we die, we have to deal with God alone. Our happiness in the afterlife depends on our love for God. Love is the seed of happiness, and it grows through worship and remembering God. Worship involves a certain level of self-discipline. curbing bodily desires so they don't distract us from our spiritual goal. This doesn't mean that desires should be completely eliminated. After all, if everyone stopped indulging bodily needs, humanity would perish. The key is to keep these desires within limits, which are laid down by the prophets under God's guidance. Ignoring these limits harms our soul. The Quran warns, those who transgress these limits wrong their own souls. Yet many people, due to their ignorance of God, do cross these boundaries. This ignorance can arise from different causes. Some people deny God's existence because they can't observe Him directly. This is like someone seeing a well-written letter and thinking it wrote itself without a writer. Others, ignorant of the soul's nature, deny the afterlife and believe that humans are no better than animals, perishing just the same. Still, others believe in God and the afterlife, but think their worship is irrelevant to God. This is like a sick man ignoring his doctor's advice, thinking it won't affect the doctor. But in reality, disobedience to God harms the soul, just as unchecked disease harms the body. Another group acknowledges God's mercy, but ignores His justice. They think, whatever we do, God is merciful, forgetting that mercy doesn't prevent people from suffering or perishing due to hunger or disease. The Quran says, every living creature's sustenance comes from God, but also, man obtains nothing except by striving. Relying only on God's mercy without effort is misguided. In short, there are many people who misunderstand God, either by underestimating His justice, denying His existence, or thinking their actions don't matter. But true knowledge of God involves recognizing His power, wisdom, and love and living within the limits He has set for our benefit. Chapter 3. The Knowledge of This World. This world is like a stage or marketplace where people pass by on their way to the next world. It's here that we gather provisions for the journey. In plain terms, this means we use our senses and experiences in this world to learn about God. Through this knowledge, we come closer to the ultimate vision of God, which is the source of happiness in the next world. Our spirit has been sent into this world of water and clay to gain experience. As long as our bodily senses are active, we're considered to be living in this world. When the senses leave us, and only the soul remains, we enter the next world. While living in this world, we have two responsibilities. First, we must nurture and protect our souls. Second, we must take care of our bodies. The soul's nourishment comes from knowing and loving God. The body's needs, however, are simpler. They include food, clothing, and shelter. These physical needs are only meant to support the soul's journey toward the next world. If we become absorbed in caring for the body without focusing on the soul, we will be like a traveler on a pilgrimage who spends all his time feeding and adorning his camel, forgetting the actual journey. The desires we have for food, clothing, and shelter are natural and were implanted in us for survival. However, these desires can easily overpower reason, which develops later in life. That's why they need to be kept in check, following the divine laws set by the prophets. When we consider this world and the things we need, we can divide them into three main categories: animals, plants, and minerals. Everything we use or need comes from these three sources. This leads to three main human occupations: weaving, for clothes; building, for shelter; and metalwork, for tools and machinery. These trades have many branches, like tailoring, masonry, and smithing. Since no one is completely self-sufficient, people develop relationships and business connections. Unfortunately, these interactions often lead to jealousy, envy, and hatred. That's why we need civil laws and government to maintain order. The complexities of the world have grown over time, largely because people have forgotten that their basic needs are simple: clothing, food, and shelter. These are necessary only to make the body a fit vehicle for the soul, allowing it to move forward in its spiritual journey. Many people make the same mistake as the traveler on pilgrimage who spends all his time caring for his camel. They become obsessed with worldly affairs, forgetting the real purpose of their journey. The Prophet Muhammad said that this world is a more powerful sorcerer than Harut and Marut, two angels mentioned in the Quran for their knowledge of sorcery. The world tricks people by making them believe it will stay with them forever, even though it is slipping away moment by moment, like a shadow that seems still but is always moving. The world pretends to be loyal and in love with us, but it ultimately abandons us to our enemies: death, regret, and despair. Jesus, peace be upon him, once saw the world in a vision as an ugly old woman. He asked her how many husbands she had. "They are too many to count," she replied. He asked if they had died or if she had divorced them. She said she had killed them all. "I am amazed," he said, "at the fools who see what you've done to others and still desire you." This world is like a seductive but deceptive woman, adorned in beautiful garments and jewelry, hiding her ugly face behind a veil. She goes out to lure people, and many follow her to their destruction. On the day of judgment, the world will appear as an old witch with green eyes and terrifying teeth. People will say, "Who is this?" The angels will answer, "This is the world for whose sake you quarreled, fought, and even took each other's lives." Then the world will be thrown into hell, and it will call out, "Where are my lovers?" God will command that they be cast into hell after her. If you think about it, the world is like a journey. The stages of this journey are represented by years, the leagues by months, the miles by days, and the steps by moments. What could be more foolish than someone who tries to make this journey his permanent home, planning for things 10 years ahead, when in reality, he may be buried in 10 days? Those who indulge in the pleasures of the world without restraint will feel like a man who has overeaten and then vomits. The sweetness is gone, but the discomfort remains. The more possessions they accumulated, gardens, wealth, slaves, the more bitter will be the pain of parting with them at death. This bitterness won't end with death because the soul that has developed a habit of greed will suffer from unfulfilled desires in the next world. Another trick of worldly things is that they start small, appearing as mere trifles, but they branch out into countless distractions, swallowing up all of a person's time and energy. Jesus, peace be upon him, said, "The lover of the world is like a man drinking seawater. The more he drinks, the thirstier he gets, until he dies from unquenched thirst." The Prophet Muhammad said, "You cannot mix with the world without being affected by it, just as you cannot go into water without getting wet." The world is like a banquet table where guests come and go. There are gold and silver dishes, plenty of food and perfume. The wise guest eats just enough, smells the perfumes, thanks the host, and leaves. The foolish guest tries to take some of the gold and silver dishes with him, only to have them wrenched from his hands as he's thrown out in disgrace. Here's a short parable to explain the deceit of the world. Imagine a ship arriving at a beautiful, wooded island. The captain tells the passengers they can go ashore for a few hours but warns them not to delay too long. The wisest passengers return to the ship quickly and claim the most comfortable seats. Others stay a bit longer, enjoying the sights and sounds of the island. When they return to the ship, the best seats are taken, so they settle for less comfortable places. Some passengers wander even farther, collecting brightly colored stones. By the time they return to the ship, they have to sit in the lower, less comfortable parts, and the stones they carried have lost their beauty. The last group of passengers goes so far that they miss the ship altogether. They wander the island, lost and hungry, eventually dying or falling prey to wild beasts. This parable represents the different attitudes people have toward the world. The first group represents the faithful, who keep themselves detached from worldly distractions. The last group represents those who care only for this world and nothing for the next. The intermediate groups represent those who believe but become entangled with the world to different degrees. Even though we've spoken a lot against the world, it's important to remember that some things in this world are not part of its deceit. Knowledge and good deeds, for example, are things that you carry with you into the next world. Though your good deeds pass, the effects of those deeds remain in your character. This is especially true for acts of devotion, which help you constantly remember and love God. These things, knowledge, good deeds, and acts of worship, are part of what the Quran means when it says, "What is with God does not perish." Marriage, food, and clothing are also good things if used wisely, just enough to help us in our journey toward the next world. But things that distract the mind and cause it to be overly attached to this world are purely evil. The Prophet Muhammad said, "The world is cursed, and everything in it is cursed, except the remembrance of God and what helps it." Chapter 4. The Knowledge of the Next World. As believers in the Quran and the traditions, we already know about the pleasures of heaven and the pains of hell that follow this life. However, what often escapes us is that there's also a spiritual heaven and hell. Regarding this, God said to his prophet, "No eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor has it entered into the heart of man what is prepared for the righteous." For the enlightened, there's a window in their hearts that opens to the realities of the spiritual world. They don't rely on hearsay or traditional belief to know what produces happiness or misery in the soul. They know it directly, just as a doctor knows what causes sickness or health in the body. Sadly, many so-called learned men blindly follow others and have no real certainty about the fate of souls in the next world. But anyone who sincerely reflects, free from bias, will arrive at clear convictions about the happiness or misery of the soul. The effect of death on man's composite nature is as follows. Man has two souls, a physical or animal soul, and a spiritual soul. The animal soul resides in the heart and functions like a vapor, spreading through the body to give each organ the ability to perform its role, like sight to the eye, hearing to the ear, etc. It can be compared to a lamp lighting up a cottage. The lamp's wick is the heart, and the body is illuminated by it. When the supply of oil, or life force, runs out, the lamp dies. That's how the animal soul dies with the body. The spiritual soul is different. It's indivisible and doesn't die when the body perishes. It's like a horseman whose horse is taken away. He still exists, but without his steed. The spiritual soul is the rider, and the body, along with the animal soul, is the steed. The spiritual soul was given the body to chase the phoenix of God's love and knowledge. Once it has caught the prize, it's not a burden to lose the body. That's why the prophet said, "Death is a gift to the believer." But woe to the soul that loses its steed before it reaches its goal. Its misery and regret will be beyond description. Consider this. the spiritual soul remains the same, even if the body is changed over time. When you were a child, your body was different from what it is now, but your soul is still the same. This shows that the soul persists, even when the body changes. The knowledge and love of God you acquire in this life will remain with your soul after death, and they will increase. This is the meaning of the Quranic verse, "The good things abide." However, if you depart from this life in ignorance of God, that ignorance also remains with you and becomes the seed of your future misery. As the Quran says, he who is blind in this life will be blind in the next. The human spirit naturally seeks to return to the upper world where it originated. God said in the Quran, "Go down from here, all of you. When guidance comes to you from me, those who follow it need not fear or grieve." The verse, "I breathed into man of my spirit," also points to the divine origin of the soul. Just as the animal soul's health depends on the balance of its components, which doctors restore through medicine when that balance is disturbed, the spiritual soul's health depends on moral balance. This balance is maintained and restored by ethical teaching and following religious guidelines. Some theologians believe that the human soul is annihilated at death and then restored, but both reason and the Quran contradict this. Reason tells us that death doesn't destroy a person's essential individuality. The Quran says, "Do not think of those who are slain in the path of God as dead. Rather, they are alive, rejoicing in the presence of their Lord." It does not mention any form of annihilation for either the righteous or the unrighteous. The Prophet once spoke to the spirits of dead unbelievers, asking if they had found the punishments he had warned them about. When his companions asked why he would speak to the dead, he replied, "They hear me better than you do." Some mystics have had glimpses of the unseen world while in a death-like trance. Their faces often reveal signs of either joy or terror, depending on the nature of their visions. But you don't need visions to understand the truth about life after death. Anyone who reflects will see that when a person dies, leaving behind their physical senses, they will feel the pain of being separated from the worldly things they loved: wives, children, wealth, land, etc. However, if a person has turned away from these things and fixed their love solely on God, they will welcome death as a reunion with their beloved. The Prophet's sayings capture this truth. Death is a bridge that unites a friend with a friend, and the world is a paradise for unbelievers, but a prison for the faithful. For the faithful, the Prophet also said, the pains of the next world all stem from excessive love of the world. In one of his sayings, he warned that every unbeliever will be tormented by 99 snakes in the grave, each with 9 heads. Some simple-minded people have dug up graves, expecting to see these snakes. What they don't realize is that these snakes are actually the evil qualities: jealousy, pride, hypocrisy, that the soul carried within. These traits are like spiritual poisons that torment the soul after death. The Quran says, "Hell surrounds the unbelievers." It doesn't say will surround them because it is already around them in this life. Their worldly attachments are the roots of their torment. Some might ask, if hell is already around us, who can escape it? We are all bound to the world by some attachments. This is true, but there are levels. There are those, like the ascetics, who have completely freed themselves from worldly attachments. Then there are many others who still possess things like wealth, family, and homes, but love God more. These people are like someone who leaves behind a beloved home to accept an important position from the king. Though they still have some attachment, their love for God overcomes it. Many people claim to love God, but still find themselves tied to worldly things. You can test this by watching what happens when their desires clash with God's commands. The profession of love for God without obedience is a lie. A person who sincerely loves God will prioritize God's commands over their own desires. One form of spiritual hell is the pain of separation from worldly things. Many people carry the seeds of this hell inside them without knowing it. When the world is taken from them, they experience a torment far worse than physical suffering. The second kind of spiritual hell is the shame that comes when a person sees their actions in their true form. A slanderer will see himself as a cannibal, eating the flesh of his dead brother. An envious person will see themselves throwing stones at a wall, only for the stones to bounce back and harm their own children. A parable can illustrate this kind of shame. Imagine a king celebrating his son's marriage. After the festivities, the son gets drunk and mistakenly goes to sleep in a tomb, thinking it's his bridal chamber. He lies down beside a decaying corpse, thinking it's his bride. When morning comes, he wakes up horrified to find himself in a tomb. At that moment, his father, the king, arrives with his soldiers. The son is overwhelmed with shame for his actions. This is a pale comparison to the shame people will feel in the next world when they realize the nature of their sinful actions. The third type of spiritual hell is disappointment, the failure to achieve the real purpose of life. Man was created to reflect the light of God's knowledge, but if he dies with his soul covered in the rust of sensual indulgence, he will fail to fulfill his purpose. Imagine a man traveling through a dark forest. Along the way, he sees colored stones lying on the ground. His companions gather the stones, advising him to do the same, saying that they will be valuable later, but he laughs at them, thinking the stones are worthless. When they all leave the forest and step into the daylight, he sees that the stones are precious gems. His companions have gathered rubies and emeralds while he has nothing. His regret will be overwhelming. This is how it will feel for those who neglected the jewels of virtue and spiritual knowledge in this world. Man's journey through life can be divided into 4 stages: sensuous, experimental, instinctive, and rational. In the first stage, man is like a moth, repeatedly burning itself at the same flame. In the second, he's like a dog that, after being beaten once, runs away at the sight of a stick. In the third stage, man is like a sheep that instinctively avoids its natural enemies, like wolves and lions. In the fourth stage, man transcends animals and gains the ability to foresee and plan for the future. Beyond these 4 stages lies a 5th stage, known to the prophets and saints, where progress can be compared to flying through the air. Man is capable of existing on several planes, from the animal to the angelic. His danger lies in the potential to sink to the lowest level or soar to the highest. In the Quran, God says, "We offered the trust of free will to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, but they refused it, yet man accepted it." Animals and angels cannot change their appointed rank, but man has the freedom to rise to the level of angels or sink to the level of animals. This is the meaning of the burden of free will that man accepted, as mentioned in the Quran. Most people, unfortunately, choose to remain in the lower stages of their journey, clinging to the material world. They resist those who are striving to move forward spiritually because they vastly outnumber the spiritual travelers. Many people, mastered by their sensual appetites, deny the existence of the next world altogether. They say that hell is just an invention by theologians to scare people, and they regard these religious scholars with thinly veiled contempt. To argue with people who are this deeply entrenched in materialism is often pointless. However, you might say to someone who has doubts, do you truly believe that the 124,000 prophets and saints who believed in the next life were all wrong and only you are right? If the person replies confidently, yes, I am as sure of it as I am that 2 is greater than 1, then they are likely beyond convincing. But if they respond that the next life is possible, though shrouded in doubt and mystery, you can offer them this analogy. Imagine you are about to eat food, and someone tells you a serpent has spat venom on it. Even if you are unsure whether the person is joking or lying, you would likely avoid eating the food just to be safe. Or imagine you are sick, and a charm writer offers to sell you a charm that might cure you. You might buy it, not because you fully believe in charms, but because there is a chance it could work. Similarly, if an astrologer advises you to take a certain medicine when the moon is in a specific constellation, you might try it, even if you don't fully believe in astrology. Why then wouldn't you heed the warnings and teachings of 124,000 prophets about the afterlife just in case they're right? People risk far more dangerous and uncertain ventures for the sake of temporary worldly gain, so why not prepare for the potential of eternal happiness or suffering? Ali once said to an unbeliever, "If you're right, then neither of us will be worse off in the future. But if we are right, we will escape punishment, and you will suffer." Ali did not say this because he had any doubt. He said it to make the unbeliever reflect on the consequences of his disbelief. From all this, it becomes clear that man's chief responsibility in this world is to prepare for the next. Even if there's a shadow of doubt about the afterlife, reason suggests that we should live as if it exists. Considering the enormity of the consequences, peace be upon those who follow this advice. Chapter 5. The Love of God. The love of God is the highest topic, the ultimate goal of our spiritual journey. Everything we have discussed so far, the dangers of the world, and the importance of good qualities, serves as preparation for this love. Human perfection lies in letting the love of God completely take over the heart. Even if it doesn't entirely dominate, it must at least be stronger than the love for anything else. However, truly understanding the love of God is a difficult task. Some theologians have denied that humans can love God because He is not of our own species. They claim that what people call love of God is merely obedience to Him. These people have not grasped the essence of true religion. All Muslims agree that the love of God is a duty. The Quran says about the believers, He loves them and they love Him. The Prophet said, no one truly believes until they love God and His Prophet more than anything else. When the angel of death came to take the soul of Abraham, Abraham said, "Have you ever seen a friend take the life of his friend?" God responded, "Have you ever seen a friend who dislikes meeting his friend?" Abraham replied, "Take my soul then, O angel." The prophet taught his companions a prayer. "O God, grant me to love you, to love those who love you, and to love whatever brings me closer to your love. Make your love more precious to me than cool water to the thirsty." The early saint Hassan Basri said, "He who knows God loves Him, and he who knows the world hates it." Now let us explore the nature of love itself. Love can be defined as a deep attraction to what brings pleasure. This is obvious in the case of the five senses. For example, the eye loves beautiful forms, the ear loves music, and so on. This kind of love is shared with animals. However, there's a higher form of love that is unique to humans. This is the perception of spiritual beauty and excellence. A person who only knows the pleasures of the senses cannot understand why the prophet said, "I love prayer more than perfumes or women." Both perfumes and women pleased him, but his love for prayer came from his ability to see the deeper beauty of God. A person who only knows the outward beauty of red cheeks, fair skin, or graceful limbs will not understand spiritual beauty. But those with insight can love even the deceased for their virtues. When we teach a child to love someone, we don't talk about physical beauty. Instead, we speak of their inner qualities. In the same way, when it comes to loving God, He alone deserves our love because of His perfection. Whatever we love in others is, in fact, a reflection of God's beauty. This is why we love the Prophet Muhammad, because he is the beloved of God. When we love learned and pious men, it is really the love of God that we are experiencing, since they reflect His attributes. The first cause of love is that a person loves themselves and seeks their own perfection. This leads directly to the love of God. For man's existence, abilities, and qualities are all gifts from God. Without God's grace, man would never have come into existence, nor could he survive or thrive. How could one not love the one who has granted them everything, unless they are ignorant of Him? The second cause of love is that man loves his benefactor. And the true benefactor of every person is God. Whatever kindness one receives from others is ultimately from God, as He inspires and moves them to act with compassion. Even when people act out of self-interest or desire for a good reputation, it is still God who has set these motives into motion. The third cause of love is contemplating the attributes of God, His power, wisdom, and mercy. Human power and wisdom are mere reflections of God's infinite qualities. This kind of love is similar to the admiration we feel for great and wise figures of the past, like the Imams Malik and Shafi'i, from whom we expect no direct benefit, yet we love them for their noble traits. The prophet David once heard God say, "My servant is dearest to me when he does not seek me out of fear of punishment or hope for reward, but out of gratitude for my divinity." In the Psalms, God says, "Who is a greater sinner than the one who worships me from fear of hell or desire for heaven? Even if I had created neither, would I not still deserve to be worshipped?" The fourth cause of love is the natural affinity between man and God. This is referred to in the saying of the prophet, "Verily, God created man in His own likeness." God has said, "My servant draws near to me until I make him my friend. When I make him my friend, I become his ear, his eye, and his tongue." This is a delicate and profound topic, often misunderstood. Some people have stumbled and mistakenly believed in the idea of incarnation or union with God. However, the affinity that exists between man and God is what allows us to love Him, even though He is not of our own species. The affinity between man and God explains why we are capable of loving Him, despite our differences. It is rooted in the truth that God created man in His own likeness. Because of this affinity, humans can develop a deep, natural love for God. The prophet once said, "God was sick, and you did not visit Him." When asked how that could be possible, he explained, "A servant of God was sick, and had you visited him, it would have been as though you visited God Himself. This shows that the closeness between God and humans allows for a relationship of love that transcends the limits of the physical world. While this is a challenging concept for many people to grasp, it helps us understand that the love of God is not merely a distant or abstract idea. Instead, it is a profound connection that springs from our very creation, allowing us to relate to God in a personal and meaningful way. Some theologians argue that humans cannot love God because He is not like us, but this argument misses the essence of the divine-human relationship. Just as we can love those who are not physically present, or even those who have passed away, we can love God despite not seeing Him. Our love is rooted in understanding His attributes and recognizing His profound influence in our lives. The vision of God. Muslims widely agree that seeing God is the greatest possible happiness for humans. This belief is rooted in the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet. However, many people express this belief with their lips without fully feeling it in their hearts. This is natural because a person cannot long for something they don't truly understand. We can explore why the vision of God is considered the greatest happiness for mankind. Every faculty of a human being has its appropriate function. When this function is fulfilled, the faculty experiences delight. For example, the eye delights in seeing, the ear in hearing, and the mind in understanding. The higher the object of knowledge, the greater the joy that comes from understanding it. Knowing the secrets of a king is far more pleasurable than knowing the secrets of a minister. In the same way, since God is the highest possible object of knowledge, knowing Him must bring the greatest pleasure. Even in this world, those who know God live in a kind of paradise, enjoying a spiritual joy that transcends the material world. But this joy is incomplete because it is based only on knowledge, not direct vision. Just as thinking of a beloved brings less joy than actually seeing them, knowing God brings less joy than directly beholding Him. While we are trapped in these bodies of clay, entangled in the material world, the veil between us and God prevents us from seeing Him fully. God explained this to Moses on Mount Sinai when He said, "You shall not see me." In the next life, the knowledge we gain of God on earth will transform into direct vision, just as a seed transforms into a full-grown tree. However, not everyone will experience this vision in the same way. Some hearts are like clear mirrors that reflect God's beauty, while others are dark and distorted. The joy of seeing God will depend on how pure a person's heart has become. A person who spent their life seeking the world instead of God will have a heart so rusted that even the vision of God will bring them no joy. Those whose hearts were consumed by love for God will experience the vision of God as the ultimate delight. Just as two people with the same eyesight may see the same beautiful face, the one who loves the person will experience far greater joy than the one who does not. Similarly, a person's joy in seeing God will be in proportion to their love for Him. But knowledge of God alone is not enough for perfect happiness. It must be accompanied by love. This love of God cannot fill a person's heart if it is already occupied with love for the material world. This purification, where love for worldly things is replaced by love for God, requires spiritual discipline and self-restraint. In this world, the condition of a person seeking the vision of God is like that of a lover who sees his beloved in the dim light of dawn while being stung by hornets. He can see his beloved, but his pain and the poor lighting prevent him from fully enjoying the moment. But when the sun rises and reveals the full beauty of the beloved, and the hornets leave him in peace, his joy becomes complete. In the same way, when a person dies, leaving behind the troubles and distractions of this world, the vision of God will be fully revealed to them, and they will experience the greatest joy. Abu Suleiman said, "He who is busy with himself now will be busy with himself then, and he who is occupied with God now will be occupied with him then." Yahya ibn Mu'adh once said, "I watched the mystic Bayazid Bastami pray through an entire night. When he finished, he stood up and said, 'O Lord, some of your servants have asked and received miracles. They walk on water, fly through the air, and command things to happen. But I don't seek any of that.' He turned to me and said, 'Yahya, are you there?' I replied, 'Yes.' He asked, 'Since when?' I said, 'For a long time.' Then I asked him to tell me about his spiritual experiences. He said, 'The Almighty showed me his kingdom, from the highest to the lowest. He raised me above the throne and the seat, and all 7 heavens. Then he said, "Ask of me whatever you desire." I answered, "I desire nothing but you." On another occasion, Bayazid said, "Even if God offered you the intimacy of Abraham, the prayer of Moses, and the spirituality of Jesus, keep your face directed only towards him, for he holds treasures greater than these." A friend once told Bayazid, "For 30 years, I have fasted by day and prayed by night, but I still do not feel the spiritual joy you speak of." Bayazid answered, "Even if you fasted and prayed for 300 years, you wouldn't find it." The friend asked, "Why?" Bayazid replied, "Because your selfishness acts as a veil between you and God." When the friend asked for advice on how to remove this selfishness, Bayazid said, "Shave off your beard, take off your fine clothes, put on a horse's nose bag filled with walnuts, hang it around your neck, and go into the market. Shout, 'Anyone who slaps me on the back of the neck will get a walnut.' Then go to the place where the judges and scholars sit." The friend said, "I can't do that." Bayazid answered, "Then your cure is impossible. This is the first step, and without it you cannot proceed." Bayazid prescribed this humiliation because his friend was obsessed with honor and pride. To break free from pride, one must experience humility. God once said to Jesus, "When I see in my servants' hearts a pure love for me, free from any selfish desire, I take it upon myself to protect that love." When people asked Jesus, "What is the greatest work of all?" he replied, "To love God and be content with his will." The Saint Rabia was once asked if she loved the Prophet. She replied, "The love of the Creator has kept me from loving the creation." The great ascetic Ibrahim ibn Adham once prayed, "O God, to me heaven is less than a gnat's wing in comparison to the love you have granted me." Anyone who thinks that happiness in the next world can be achieved without loving God is gravely mistaken. The very essence of eternal happiness lies in reaching God, the longed-for goal. If a person had no love for God in this life, they will not suddenly love him in the next. And if their love for God was small in this life, it will be small in the next. In short, the degree of happiness we experience in the next life will directly correspond to how much we loved God in this life. If a person's heart grew attached to things opposed to God, the next life will be completely alien to them. The very things that bring joy to the righteous will cause them misery. Here's a parable to illustrate this. A scavenger enters a perfume market and is overwhelmed by the scents, fainting because they are too much for him. People gather around him and try to revive him with rosewater and musk, but he only gets worse. Finally, someone brings a piece of filth and holds it to his nose. The scavenger instantly revives, sighing, "Ah, this is perfume indeed." In the same way, a worldly person will find the spiritual delights of the next world unbearable. What brings joy to the righteous will only increase their misery. The next world is one of pure spirit, where the beauty of God is fully revealed. Those who have aimed to purify their hearts will find affinity with this world of spirit, while those who are attached to worldly desires will suffer. All austerities, devotions, and studies are meant to cultivate this spiritual affinity. This is what the Quran means when it says, "He who has purified his soul is happy, and he who has corrupted his soul is miserable." Those with true spiritual insight understand this truth through direct experience, not just as a traditional saying. The real signs of the love of God are simple to identify, and they provide certainty to those who seek it. These signs are not based on miracles, but on the fruits of a purified heart and a deep personal connection with God. Chapter 6. The Love of the Prophet. Loving the Prophet Muhammad is a duty for every Muslim, and it stems naturally from the love of God. To love God is to love all his messengers, and none is more beloved than Muhammad, his final prophet. God says in the Quran, "Say, if you love God, follow me, and God will love you." Loving the Prophet isn't just about admiring his greatness. It's also about following his example in everything we do. The Prophet himself said, "None of you truly believes until I am more beloved to him than his parents, his children, and all mankind." This love should be a natural response, just as we love a person who brings us good news. But the Prophet didn't just bring good news. He brought salvation, the key to eternal happiness. A sincere love for the Prophet is shown by making his example the guiding light of one's life. The Prophet was sent to guide people to God, and loving him means following the path that he laid out. God has made the Prophet a perfect role model for all humanity, saying in the Quran, "Verily, in the messenger of God, you have a beautiful example for anyone whose hope is in God and the last day." The Prophet's character embodied all the qualities that bring a person closer to God: mercy, patience, humility, and compassion. His life was a manifestation of the highest moral standards. Loving the Prophet means striving to embody these same qualities in our own lives. One way to express our love for the Prophet is through sending blessings upon him, as instructed by God in the Quran. Verily, God and his angels send blessings upon the Prophet. O you who believe, send blessings upon him and peace. This simple act connects us to the Prophet and draws God's mercy and blessings upon us. But love for the Prophet isn't just an emotional attachment. It's a practical love that transforms our actions. Just as a person who loves someone will naturally want to follow and emulate them, so too should our love for the Prophet lead us to follow his example. Every part of our life, our worship, our character, and our relationships should be modeled after his example. A key aspect of loving the Prophet is understanding that he was not just a man, but the messenger of God. He came to teach us how to live in this world in a way that leads to success in the next. Loving him means obeying his teachings and adhering to his sunnah, traditions. The companions of the Prophet loved him deeply. One of his companions, Zayd ibn Dathana, was once captured by the Quraysh, and they asked him, "Would you rather have Muhammad in your place and you be free?" Zayd replied, "By God, I would not wish for Muhammad to be in my place, even if it meant I could go free and be safe with my family." The love that the companions had for the Prophet was so strong that they were willing to sacrifice everything for him. This kind of love is not limited to the companions. It is something that we too can attain. By learning about the life and character of the Prophet, reflecting on his immense sacrifices for humanity, and following his guidance, we can deepen our love for him. Loving the Prophet also means loving those who love him. The Prophet said, "None of you truly believes until you love me more than anything else." This love extends to those who follow the Prophet's teachings and strive to live in accordance with his example. It also includes love for the Prophet's family and his companions, who dedicated their lives to supporting him and spreading his message. Our love for the Prophet is a reflection of our love for God, and the two are inseparable. To love God is to love his messenger, and to love the Prophet is to love God. This love is not a superficial emotion, but a deep and transformative force that changes how we live and how we see the world. The Prophet once said, "Whoever revives my sunnah, tradition, has truly loved me." Reviving the Prophet's sunnah means bringing his teachings into our daily lives, whether in prayer, charity, kindness, or any other aspect of life. It means making his example a living reality in our actions. The companions of the Prophet exemplified this kind of love. They sacrificed their wealth, their comfort, and even their lives to follow the Prophet and spread his message. They loved him not only with their hearts, but with their actions, and this is what true love for the Prophet looks like. The Prophet's love for his ummah, community, was boundless. He was concerned for his followers more than they were for themselves. His prayers and supplications were constantly for their guidance, forgiveness, and well-being. He said, "My example and the example of my ummah is like a man who kindles a fire, and moths begin to fall into it. I am grabbing hold of you by the waistbands to keep you from falling into it, but you insist on falling into the fire." This deep love the Prophet had for his followers should be reciprocated by a love for him that motivates us to avoid the wrong and to follow his teachings. Just as he sought to protect us from harm, we should honor him by living in a way that reflects his teachings and brings us closer to God. Another way to show our love for the Prophet is by honoring his family. The Prophet's family, known as the Al-Bayt, were deeply beloved by him, and he instructed his followers to love and respect them. The Prophet said, "I remind you of my family. I remind you of my family." The love for the Prophet's family is part of our love for him. Finally, loving the Prophet also means spreading his message. The Prophet's mission was to bring people to God, and it's our duty to continue that mission by living as examples of his teachings and sharing the message of Islam with others. The Prophet said, "Convey from me, even if it's just one verse." The love of the Prophet isn't just something we feel, it's something we live. It's a love that transforms our hearts, our actions, and our lives. It brings us closer to God and closer to the eternal happiness that awaits those who love and follow his messenger. Against Chapter 7, the love of the saints and scholars. In addition to loving the Prophet, it is important for Muslims to love the saints, awliya, and scholars, ulama, who carry the light of his teachings. The saints are those who have reached the highest stages of spiritual purity and closeness to God, and the scholars are the inheritors of the prophet's knowledge. Loving them is a way of loving God because they represent His guidance in the world. The Quran speaks highly of the righteous, saying, "Verily, the friends of God, Awliya, have no fear, nor shall they grieve." Saints are those who have purified themselves from worldly desires and have dedicated their lives to seeking God. Their hearts are so close to God that His light shines through them, and they become beacons of guidance for others. The prophet said, "The scholars are the heirs of the prophets," meaning that while the prophets themselves were sent to guide humanity, the scholars take on this role after the prophets. Through their deep understanding of the Quran and the Hadith, scholars help others understand the divine law and guide them toward spiritual growth. Saints and scholars play different roles but share the same goal: to lead people to God. The saints embody the spiritual path, showing others how to purify their hearts and draw closer to God through devotion, asceticism, and remembrance of God. The scholars focus on knowledge, teaching others the principles of Islamic law and belief. Both are essential for a balanced spiritual life. Loving the saints and scholars is a way of showing gratitude for the knowledge and spiritual insight they provide. They are the ones who keep the light of faith alive in the world, and through them, the teachings of the prophet are preserved and passed down. Without them, people would be lost in confusion, unable to distinguish right from wrong. A person who truly loves God and His prophet will naturally love those who dedicate their lives to serving God's cause. The saints and scholars have sacrificed the comforts of the world to seek spiritual truth and guide others toward it. Their love for God is so intense that it spills over into their lives, affecting everyone around them. The saints are known for their deep devotion to God. Their hearts are free from the distractions of the world, and they are constantly focused on the remembrance of God. They have reached a level of spiritual purity where they are no longer concerned with worldly success or recognition. Their only concern is pleasing God and helping others find Him. In the history of Islam, many saints have shown extraordinary miracles, karamat, as a sign of their closeness to God. These miracles are not the purpose of their sainthood, but rather a byproduct of their intense devotion. The true miracle of the saints is their ability to transform hearts and guide people to God. The scholars, on the other hand, play a critical role in teaching the principles of Islam. They are the guardians of Islamic knowledge, ensuring that the Quran and Hadith are understood correctly and that Islamic law is followed properly. Their role is essential because without sound knowledge, people would easily fall into error. The Prophet once said, "The superiority of the scholar over the worshipper is like the superiority of the moon over all the stars." This highlights the importance of scholars in guiding people toward the correct understanding of the faith. While worship is crucial, it must be based on sound knowledge, and this knowledge comes from the scholars. It is said that the ink of the scholar is more valuable than the blood of the martyr. This is because while martyrs give their lives for the defense of the faith, scholars ensure that the faith itself is preserved and correctly understood by future generations. Their work is a constant, lifelong effort to preserve the message of Islam. Another hadith of the Prophet states, "Whoever travels a path in search of knowledge, God will make easy for him a path to paradise." This emphasizes the importance of seeking knowledge and the high status of scholars who dedicate their lives to teaching it. The scholars are responsible for keeping the teachings of the Quran and Hadith alive, and by doing so, they secure a place of honor in this life and the next. Loving the saints and scholars is not just an emotional attachment. It is a way of recognizing the value of their role in guiding humanity. It is through their example that we learn how to live according to the teachings of the Prophet and how to seek God in our daily lives. Their wisdom and knowledge serve as a map for those who are lost and seeking the right path. This love for saints and scholars should also manifest in practical ways. We should respect their teachings, support their efforts, and seek their company. The Prophet said, "A man is upon the religion of his closest friend, so let each of you look carefully at whom you befriend." Being in the company of righteous scholars and saints helps us grow spiritually and strengthens our faith. Their presence reminds us of God and keeps us focused on our ultimate purpose. The Quran says, "Ask those who have knowledge if you do not know." This encourages us to seek out scholars when we are unsure or need guidance. In matters of religion, it is essential to consult those who have a deep understanding of Islamic law and spirituality. Ignorance can lead to mistakes, and following our desires without proper knowledge can lead us astray. This is why scholars are so important. They help us navigate the complexities of faith with wisdom and understanding. The love for scholars should not be limited to those of the past. While we respect and honor the great scholars and saints who have passed on, we must also support and learn from the scholars of our time. They are carrying on the same mission of guiding people to God, and they face the challenges of modern society while maintaining the integrity of Islamic teachings. But loving the scholars also means holding them accountable. A true scholar should embody the teachings of Islam in their life and actions. Unfortunately, not all people who claim to be scholars live up to this standard. The Prophet warned that in the end times, there would be scholars who lead people astray, using their knowledge for personal gain rather than for the sake of God. True scholars, however, are humble, sincere, and dedicated to serving their communities. They do not seek wealth, fame, or power. Instead, they seek the pleasure of God and the success of their fellow believers. They are like lights in the darkness, guiding people toward the truth. The saints and scholars are connected in their mission to bring people closer to God. The scholars provide the knowledge and understanding necessary for people to live according to God's commands, while the saints embody the spirit of those teachings, showing others how to live in constant awareness of God's presence. Both are essential for spiritual growth. It is important to recognize that not everyone is capable of becoming a scholar or a saint, but we can all benefit from their guidance. The Prophet said, "The best people are those who, when seen, remind you of God." This is the essence of the saints and scholars. They remind us of our purpose and guide us to the right path. Loving the scholars and saints is also a way of loving the community of believers. The Quran says, "Hold fast to the rope of God, all of you together, and do not be divided." The scholars and saints help keep the community united by teaching and exemplifying the correct way to live. By loving and supporting them, we strengthen the bonds of the Muslim Ummah community. In addition, the scholars and saints remind us of the importance of humility. The great scholars of the past, despite their immense knowledge, were known for their humility and devotion. Imam Malik, one of the greatest scholars of Islamic law, once said, "I do not know," more than he ever said, "I know." This shows that true scholars are not arrogant in their knowledge, but remain humble and conscious of their limitations before God. Saints are known for their humility as well. Their closeness to God comes from their willingness to let go of their egos and desires, focusing entirely on seeking God's pleasure. This is a lesson for all of us. In a world that often values pride and self-promotion, the example of the saints teaches us the importance of humility, sincerity, and devotion. The love of the saints and scholars also reminds us of the importance of gratitude. Through their sacrifices, they have preserved the teachings of Islam and passed them down to us. Without their efforts, much of the knowledge of the Quran and Hadith might have been lost or misunderstood. Our love for them is a way of showing our gratitude for their dedication and service to the faith. In conclusion, the love of the saints and scholars is an extension of the love of God and His Prophet. They are the inheritors of the Prophet's mission, guiding people to God through their knowledge and devotion. Loving them means supporting their work, learning from their example, and striving to embody their teachings in our own lives. Our love for the saints and scholars connects us to the long chain of spiritual seekers who have dedicated their lives to God. It is through them that we find our way to the truth, and through loving them, we draw closer to God. Chapter 8: The Knowledge of the Path to Happiness. The ultimate purpose of every human being is to attain true happiness, and this happiness is found in the presence of God. Every action, every choice we make in this life is either bringing us closer to or farther from this goal. To achieve true happiness, we must understand the path that leads to it. And this path is found in following God's guidance through faith, knowledge, and action. The knowledge of the path to happiness is essential because it tells us what we need to do to prepare for the next world. The Quran frequently reminds us that this life is temporary and that our true home is in the hereafter. It says, "The life of this world is nothing but play and amusement, but the hereafter is better for those who are righteous." To be successful in the next life, we must understand what actions will lead us to God and which will distance us from Him. The first step on this path is faith. Without faith, none of our actions have meaning in the sight of God. Faith is the foundation of everything, and it begins with belief in God, His messengers, and the unseen realities of the hereafter. The Quran says, "This is the book. There is no doubt in it, a guidance for those who are conscious of God, who believe in the unseen." Faith is the light that illuminates the path to happiness and gives our actions purpose and meaning. However, faith alone is not enough. It must be combined with knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim." This knowledge is not just academic or intellectual. It is the knowledge of how to live according to God's will. The purpose of knowledge in Islam is to guide us to right action, helping us to fulfill our obligations to God and to treat others justly. The knowledge that leads to happiness is of two kinds: outward knowledge and inward knowledge. Outward knowledge is the understanding of Islamic law, Sharia, which governs our actions and interactions with others. It teaches us what is lawful and unlawful, what is obligatory and recommended, and how to live a life that pleases God. Inward knowledge, on the other hand, relates to the heart. It teaches us how to purify our intentions, develop sincerity, and cultivate love and fear of God. This inner dimension of knowledge is crucial because it ensures that our outward actions are done for the right reasons. The Quran says, "On the day when neither wealth nor children will be of any benefit, except one who comes to God with a sound heart. A sound heart is one that is filled with the remembrance of God and free from hypocrisy, pride, and other spiritual diseases. The third element on the path to happiness is action. Faith and knowledge must be put into practice for them to be effective. The Quran constantly calls believers to action, saying, "Those who believe and do righteous deeds will have gardens beneath which rivers flow." The combination of belief and righteous action is what leads to success in this world and the next. Righteous actions include both our obligations to God, such as prayer, fasting, and charity, and our treatment of others. The Prophet said, "The best of you are those who are best to others." Treating others with kindness, fairness, and compassion is a key part of the path to happiness. Our actions toward others reflect our relationship with God, for how we treat His creation is a sign of how much we love Him. In addition to these outward actions, there are spiritual practices that help us stay connected to God. The most important of these is remembrance of God, dhikr. The Quran says, "Remember me, and I will remember you." Remembrance of God keeps the heart alive and focused on the ultimate goal of life, closeness to God. It helps us avoid being distracted by worldly concerns and reminds us that our true happiness lies in God alone. Along with remembrance, another essential spiritual practice is repentance, tawbah. No one is free from mistakes and sins, but the path to happiness requires that we constantly turn back to God when we fall short. The Prophet said, "All the children of Adam are sinners, but the best of sinners are those who repent." Repentance cleanses the heart of the darkness caused by sin and renews our relationship with God. The inner transformation required on the path to happiness involves removing the barriers that prevent us from seeing and loving God. These barriers include pride, arrogance, greed, and attachment to worldly pleasures. The Quran warns against the dangers of being attached to the world, saying, "The love of desires has been made beautiful for people, of women and children, and heaped up sums of gold and silver, fine horses, livestock, and crops. That is the enjoyment of this worldly life, but God has with Him the best return." To truly follow the path to happiness, we must detach ourselves from excessive love of this world and focus on what will bring us closer to God. This doesn't mean abandoning the world entirely, but rather using it as a means to attain the pleasure of God. The Prophet said, "Live in this world as if you were a stranger or a traveler passing through." The world is a temporary stop on our way to the next life, and our focus should always be on preparing for that final destination. Part of the knowledge of the path to happiness involves understanding the balance between hope and fear. We must have hope in God's mercy, believing that He will forgive our shortcomings and reward our efforts. But we must also have fear of His punishment, knowing that our actions have consequences and that we will be held accountable for them. The Quran beautifully captures this balance, saying, "Inform my servants that I am the forgiving, the merciful, but that my punishment is the most severe punishment." The path to happiness requires that we walk between these two poles, always hoping for God's mercy while being mindful of His justice. Another important aspect of the path to happiness is gratitude, shukr. The Quran says, "If you are grateful, I will surely increase you in favor." Gratitude is a state of the heart that recognizes all blessings as coming from God and responds with praise and thankfulness. Gratitude brings contentment and peace to the heart, allowing us to appreciate the good in our lives instead of focusing on what we lack. The final element on the path to happiness is patience, sabr. The Quran repeatedly calls on believers to be patient, saying, "Indeed, God is with the patient." Patience is required in all aspects of life, whether in dealing with hardship, resisting temptation, or persevering in good deeds. Without patience, it's easy to give up when things become difficult or when results don't come as quickly as we would like. Patience is not just about enduring difficulties. It's about trusting in God's wisdom and timing. The prophet said, "Wondrous is the affair of the believer, for there is good for him in every matter. If he is afflicted with hardship, he is patient, and that is good for him. And if he is blessed with ease, he is grateful, and that is good for him." This shows us that no matter what circumstances we face, patience and gratitude will lead us to success. In conclusion, the path to happiness is a journey of faith, knowledge, and action. It requires sincere belief in God, understanding the teachings of Islam, and putting them into practice in our daily lives. By following this path, we can attain the ultimate goal of life, closeness to God, and eternal happiness in His presence. The key to success on this path is to remain focused on the hereafter, always remembering that this life is temporary and that our true home is with God. Through faith, knowledge, righteous actions, and spiritual practices like remembrance, repentance, gratitude, and patience, we can purify our hearts and prepare for the eternal happiness that awaits us in the next life. Thank you for listening to The Alchemy of Happiness by Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, brought to you by Joyful Muslims. We hope this timeless wisdom has inspired you on your journey toward inner peace and spiritual enlightenment. For more insightful audiobooks, be sure to explore our collection on Audible.